You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Hello, friends. In this episode, well, honestly, this is just a super fun story to share, and I'm looking forward to it. My guest is Anne Alexander-Sieder, and she's an actor, a wife, a mom, and a pretty awesome business coach, as it turns out. And we talk about her becoming an actor, taking a parenting pause, and going back to acting years later. Honestly, after we wrapped up the interview, she dropped that I can actually go watch her right now in on Netflix in a movie called The Heidelberg Holiday. So I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to let you enjoy this interview. Let's go. Anne Alexander-Sieder, welcome to the Art of Imperfect Adulting.
Thank you very much, Amy Stone. I'm so glad to be here.
Me too. Are you ready for a fun chat?
I am so ready for a fun chat. I've got my water. I've got another thermos of water. I'm ready to go.
I love it. I love it. So this is our first conversation together. We've never met.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get to know you. We're going to talk about a lot of things today, but as a starting point, I'd love it if you could please share with the audience and me what part of the world you call home today, and as much or as little about your family and home life as you want.
Okay. I am an American, as you all may guess from my accent, but I live in Munich, Germany, and I have lived in Europe longer than I ever lived in the States. I came here when I was about 21, something like that, to finish up my drama school. And then I did the typical backpacking around Europe. And then I would always go back home. And home for me back then was Chicago. And then I would come back to Europe and then I'd go home and then I'd come back. And on one of my trips in Europe, I got set up on a blind date with this hot German guy that my girlfriend had told me about 2 years previously and described him as my future husband. And back then, she's like, you've got to write him a letter. You've got to include a picture of yourself and you have to send it. We're talking a long time ago. And so I was like, what do I look like? A Russian mail away bride? That's not happening. And so I went to go visit her. And then she and her husband finally finagled this meeting between the two of us. And I have to say, I knew within 5 minutes that she was right. And we have been together for almost 30 years. We've been together for 29 years now. So there you go.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
So
We
nothing,
have a son.
you have one child. Okay, so one
We have
child.
one son. He's 27. We have a beautiful border collie. Her name is Zoe. We have a furry daughter. And that's it.
Nothing against mail order brides. I actually have a relative who is a serial marrier, and one of those was an actual. He responded to an ad and found somebody that that he married, and they are, as far as I know, still married. So like, I am open to
Wow.
all. I
Okay.
know, I
Do
know.
you know
It's
though? I mean, it's a whole nother conversation, but marriage is a choice,
it is.
right? And staying in a marriage is a choice. And so nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But if you can respect that person and you like them and they don't repulse you, it's probably a good basis for a relationship, a long-term relationship, right?
100%. I mean, it was a very eventful series of conversations when this person in my family was going through this. So I'm not going to say that it's not a good conversation starter, but
Mm,
I do think it's hilarious to bring up. All right. So anyway, we got way off track, which is a
yeah.
sign that I will have to work hard to keep us on task. And you get two people who talk a lot. That is what happens. Okay, so from the information you sent me before we had this conversation, I believe that maybe your first career was as an actor, and I've got even more questions about this now that you shared that you live in Munich. So do you want to tell us about that? And I'll give you
Sure.
like a prompt, which is I'm always curious about what inspires people, young people, like young you, little you, to go into a career as a performing artist.
Mm. Well, I think my first experience with being an actor was at summer camp. I mean, it's like
Okay.
most often a kid's first experience is at school, summer camp, one of those. And we were doing Oliver Twist, and we were all just kind of like corralled through the different auditions. And the singing, the dancing, the text, all those different things, right? And I mean, I was just like, okay, I'm supposed to go here now. Okay. I just kind of did everything everybody else was doing. And then I ended up getting the one and only really female part in it. Well, of course, the orphans were mixed, boys and girls, but everything else, all the main characters are all male, and there's only Nancy who's the female. And that's what I ended up getting cast at. But even then, I didn't get it. It didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't gunning for it. So I didn't, but it was when we were performing it, and I can still see this. I'm standing on stage, I'm singing As Long as He Needs Me. I have no idea what those words mean. I'm 10.
Okay.
But I'm looking out at the audience. The lights are super bright. I can see everybody in silhouette. And all of a sudden, I had like this moment, like what I imagine it must feel like, because I've never done it, but that moment when you jump out of an airplane before you start to plummet, that sort of floating sensation.
Okay.
And I felt like we were all together, like the audience, I had them. And there was something in my little 10-year-old skinny body that was super powerful and moving about that. And it was like that hit of, honestly, I compare it to a drug, like that hit of a drug, adrenaline, whatever it is, that you're just like, and you're always kind of chasing that feeling of connection. There's nothing like that feeling of connection, to be connected to so many people at one time. And I came home, and acting wasn't on my radar as a career. My dad was a Harvard graduate. My mom was an entrepreneur. I mean, it was just like not part of the vocabulary. And, but, I started organizing all the neighborhood kids, food, glorious food, we're all doing all this stuff, right? And I would always participate in things, but it sort of fell away. And it stayed in the back of my mind as like oh, wouldn't that be nice? But not serious. And I've always been interested in how people think, in how people express themselves. And those two things really came together for me when I took a blow-off course in seventh grade, which was American Sign Language,
Okay.
thinking easy A. And I fell in love with it. And it was like, they're just so expressive, deaf people, because they don't express themselves through words. They express themselves through their bodies, literally, and through watching other people
Yeah.
expressing themselves through their bodies. And I just fell in love with that. And I've always, as I say, been interested in how people think, how people tick, as they say here in Germany. And so for a long time, I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist for deaf children. Very specific.
That is very specific. No one would come back to you and say you need to pick a narrow niche. You would be like, I got
No,
it. This
very
is very
specific.
vertical.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of problems with my dad growing up. I was a rebellious teenager, a wild child. And I think when I was around 17, I'm like applying to colleges. And I probably said, Hey, Dad, I need money to apply for colleges. And he was like, Oh, I'm not paying for that. And then I was like, Oh, but we're still talking like it was the 80s. So it wasn't like the end of the world, right? So I'm thinking, it's not great, but it wasn't also the end of the world. And I was like, Well, okay, as long as you have no expectations that I'm to become a lawyer or a psychiatrist, then I'm just going to do my thing. And then I was becoming very close with my grandma at that time. She lived in Chicago. I grew up in Detroit. And my grandma, I didn't know, but she had been under contract to one of the big studios in Hollywood years and years ago, like in the 1930s or whatever it was. And I never knew that about her, that it had been a dream of hers. And so when we started she always knew that I was into it. And when I had decided, I don't know if I even told her that my dad isn't going to pay for university, but she was like, well, come to Chicago. Detroit's a dead end, you know?
Right. Well,
And
in the
so,
80s, that was definitely a transitional city. Detroit is awesome now. I don't know when the last time you were there. Detroit
yes,
is amazing at the moment.
yeah, it's really coming up. I mean, I've always thought, that's a whole nother conversation. Detroit was always trying to have its renaissance, literally from the time I can remember. I was
Yeah.
born and raised in Detroit, in Detroit.
Yeah.
Like I lived in Lafayette Park, Palmer Park, Indian Village, Huntington Woods, Bloomfield Hills, went to school in Grosse Pointe Shores. Like I was all over Detroit.
The only one of those, I have a kid living in Ann Arbor, so I fly in and out of Detroit. And when you tell people you're going to Detroit, the legacy of the 80s and that like lives on. People who have not
Yeah,
been there are like, oh my God, it's, a nightmare.
yeah.
So I was blown away to spend time in the city and just, I mean, I was just really, really impressed.
Were you in the city or were you
Yeah,
like in
so
one
I
of the
did.
suburbs?
Well, she's in Ann Arbor, so definitely in the suburbs. But I ran, when you have a kid who's living, well, I don't know if you're in Germany, so maybe it's slightly different. I like plan activities to go and be there and visit. And so I
Mm,
ran the Detroit Half Marathon and spent a weekend in there.
good for
And I
you.
also went to the Motown Museum, Motown, I think so, and some other things like that. But so I like yeah. So I think that I don't have a memory of it at all or any experience of it from before. I just saw it now in like the 2020s. But the architecture is
Yeah.
unlike anything I've ever seen.
Amazing. Detroit
Yeah.
was the richest city in the
Right.
entire country
I mean,
during
it
its
is
heyday. Yes.
mind blowing,
Yes.
and it's just there's a lot of coolness, and I am drawn to melting pot communities where there's a lot of
Yeah.
diversity. And oh my gosh, Detroit has that in spades. Like there's,
So much.
so much. Yeah. Sorry,
When people ask where I
tangent,
grew up, like the place what's that?
tangent, like off to the
Tangent.
side. Like,
Well,
right.
well, we're going to go off on another tiny one. But
Yeah.
when I grew up in Lafayette Park, and Lafayette Park, well, that was like my formative years, the first 10 years of my life, more or less. And Lafayette Park, I always describe it as Sesame Street in steel and glass
Okay.
because it was all designed by Mies van der Rohe. I don't know if you're
Don't know
familiar
that
with.
name, but I take your word
Okay,
for it.
he's the grandfather of the modern skyscraper.
Okay.
So all steel and glass, right?
Well,
But it
that's
was
like the Renaissance Center Hotel, which is one of the ones downtown, might also be then from his because that's all steel and
It's
glass.
not.
But it's
No,
okay,
it's
different.
yeah, but
Okay.
he definitely inspired that,
Okay.
right?
All right.
His
Because
stuff was much boxier and
oh,
right.
because
This is
that's
like
very
from the 50s and
round.
60s. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Definite tangent there.
Sorry.
So then I went to Chicago and I started going to acting school. And I mean, one thing kind of led to another. The school I was at, which is no longer, but it used to bring in coaches, teachers, instructors, whatever you want to call them, from RADA, which is the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art,
Okay.
and from London. And so it was always kind of like this dream of mine, like when I finish here, then I want to go study there for a semester.
All right.
And a lot of us did that who from that school went and
Sure.
finished up in London. And then, I was there and I was young and wanted to see the world. And so I planned it, right? So I bought a Eurail ticket. I backpacked around Europe and with a girlfriend of mine who had also been in acting school. And we did that for like 3 months. And that was kind of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then I came back to Chicago, started doing a lot of theater, mostly theater. Um, and then I would go back, like then I was in Rome. I lived in Rome for a few years, then I went back to Chicago, and then I was doing more like commercial and starting to audition for film and stuff. But I was making enough money. I had landed a McDonald's commercial
Very good.
and I was also in an equity theater show. So I was making enough money to have my health insurance paid through SAG and not to have to work another side job. So I was like, check, check. I was, you don't need a whole lot of money when you're young, right? So
I
I
know
was
it's the
like,
most
yeah,
amazing thing. I
yeah,
think back to how cheap my life was, and I'm just like, oh, it's
totally.
so nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I probably was not making any great shakes, but it was enough to pay my rent. And it was enough to like, I didn't have to do anything else. And I was like doing, thinking I was doing really well. And also thinking like, okay, it's very clear how my future is going to pan out now. I mean, this is clear. And one time on a visit to a girlfriend of mine who had married a German, um, and I thought I was still in love with this guy who I'd been with in Rome. So, and I couldn't get over him. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go visit my girlfriend in Germany, and then I'm going to go see him and see if it's all in my head or if I really do love him. Either way, if it's the latter, I need to figure this out. And if it's the first, then, I'm free. And on my way down to Rome, I met my husband on this blind date. And I
Ah,
really liked him, but I insisted, like, he's like, stay, stay. And I was, nope, I am going to Rome because I needed to know if I still love this other guy.
sure.
And so we had a lunch date for the next day. I walked into the restaurant. I can still see him sitting there. He's there and he's, as cute as he ever was. But I opened the door, nothing. I'm like, nothing. It's like, yes, I'm free.
Okay.
Matthias. I
That's
get
and that's the German because that could also be a Spanish
Yeah,
name, sure. The
that's true. Yeah.
all right, so then this leads right into the next series of questions that I had. So you mentioned that you had a very clear vision for what you thought your life was going to look like.
Yeah.
Was that vision professional acting forever, or was it husband, family, kids?
It was both.
Okay, both. All right.
Yeah. I always wanted to be a mom.
Okay.
Always. I'm the oldest of four sisters. Yeah. I always wanted to be a mother.
Okay.
Um,
Did you
and I
think that that
didn't,
would involve taking a pause from performing?
no.
All right, so that's yeah,
Yeah.
it is both. I'm not a performer. I have a totally different thing, but that also completely caught me by surprise
Yeah.
when I made the decision to have a family. I was like, oh, all of a sudden I understand why people are doing that. Like before, I would look at people and say to myself in my head, like, I don't know why they don't just come back to work, like hire, do the thing.
What's the matter with you? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then you go through the very painful discovery that there is not actually a job that is going to pay you a full-time. I can't imagine what it's like when you're in a performer, totally different schedule. There's not a company that's going to hire me to work from 10:15 to 11:30 and have time
Right.
off for every single ear
Actually,
infection.
I did find a pretty good workaround. So I started doing a ton of voiceover. So let me
Oh,
back
nice.
up a little
Yeah. Oh,
bit.
yeah. So
Yeah.
back up. Tell me about this.
So
Tell
I
us about
moved
this.
to Germany, didn't speak German.
Oh, yeah, right. We
Um,
didn't even touch on that. Like, how do you, what
yeah,
kind of performing work do you do in a country where everybody speaks German?
exactly. And I mean, I'm just going to get real with you here. I got knocked up
Okay.
and we'd only known each other for 3 months. And so I had decided I am I'm 29. I think it was 28 or 29 at that point. 29 it must have been.
The timing is right.
I'm like, you know what? I'm old enough. I'm
Yeah.
taking responsibility. This is
Yeah.
not the baby's problem or fault or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I laid it out to him. I said, you have four choices, two of which were totally bogus. But I wanted to see his reaction,
Okay.
I was like, look, I'm not having an abortion, but I don't want you to feel like you don't have a say in the matter because you do. He didn't, but you do. And so here are the four
You
choices.
don't, but I'll give it to you anyway.
I'll pretend we do.
I'll
Yeah,
involve you in this conversation with the right to ignore what you say.
you're right. Exactly. And I said, we can give the baby up for adoption. Never would have happened. But I wanted to see what his reaction was. And he's like, I can see him like physically repelling to this. And I'm like, good, check, on my little mental notepad, right? Then the second thing was I said, well, you could be the primary caregiver and I will be the secondary caregiver and support you as much as I can financially and whatever, right? All of that. Also not going to happen. I would never have given away the baby. But then he's like kind of like rocking back, like doing that thing, like, yeah, not ideal, but not impossible.
Right.
Like you could see it going through his head. And then I said, I can be the primary caregiver and you can support us and be the secondary caregiver. And then he's like kind of nodding more. It's becoming less of like, I don't know, to maybe, yeah, that sounds more like it. And I said, or we can try living together for 6 months. And if that doesn't work, then we go back to plan B or plan C, which would have been plan B, of course, me being the primary caregiver.
Sure.
And that was the first night I'd come to visit him in Munich. And that was the first night. And then we didn't talk about it for a week. And it was killing me, but I did not bring it up again. I thought, well, no answer is an answer too. I am just going to enjoy the moment. And then I'm going to worry about it when I get home.
Okay.
And I also have an amazing family. So I knew I had support there. And that I was old enough to figure it out. I wasn't worried about that.
Yeah.
And so on the very last day, he's like, well, I think we should try living together. And then, about a month later, I think, or maybe 2 months later, I was moving to Munich. So getting pregnant is really what kind of like, if that hadn't happened, our hands wouldn't have been forced. We probably wouldn't have worked out, to be very honest.
Okay.
Where I love him. He's an amazing man. I totally lucked out. But we're so different. And we're also both very strong. So it would have been easy to just go, no,
Right.
you're I'm in
Right.
Chicago, you're in Munich. This is just too much work. But when you make the decision that there's something more important, and we both had, that our child was the most important thing. And I did love him, but when your hand is kind of forced with that, like, do you love him? Do you really love him? Or do you
Right.
just think you do because you're right? And so there was a lot of that as well. But anyway, that was 29 years ago. We're still together.
That's
Our
good.
son has been out of the house for 5 years. So
Oh
yeah.
my God, I'm so jealous. I'm very close to being an empty nester, but not quite there yet. All right, so in the bio you sent me, I think you phrased it that you took a break, but it sounds like it was only sort of a break. You were doing some things, voiceover work maybe, but you stepped back from, I guess, sort of really active stage performing
Yeah.
type things. How long was the break?
So within the first 2 years, I was already getting antsy. I was like, what can
Okay.
I do to? So I had seen a poster somewhere for the American Drama Group in Munich. And so I went and made an appointment and auditioned, and the guy was like, fantastic, welcome to the company, blah, blah, blah. He starts pulling out his calendar to show me the touring schedule. And I was like, whoa, 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 tour? No, I have a 2-year-old. There's no
Right.
way that I can do that. And I was mortified. And because I hadn't, even checked into this. And I apologized. I get up to leave. And on a whim, as I'm closing the door behind me, I leaned back in and I said, hey, you don't happen to have any names for me here in Munich, do you? And he thought about it for a second. He gave me two names. And those names became pivotal in launching my voiceover career.
Okay.
And here in Germany, in America as well, to a certain extent, but really here in Germany, they really shoebox you. So I was considered a speaker, but not an actor. And
Okay.
whenever people would be like, wow, you do that so well, I was like, yeah, I'm an actor. You know,
Thanks.
this is what I
I know.
do. Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know why you're so surprised. It's kind of
I knew,
insulting.
right?
Yeah. And then that led to me being a presenter, which is
Okay.
like doing the intros and outros and commercial work and stuff like that. So I was always doing acting adjacent, which was great. It was lucrative. It was very flexible. I was known for bringing my son and my dog to the studios with me. We had a very traditional relationship, my husband and I. So I was still the one in charge of our son. I was always making dinner. I was in charge of the house. But like a major day for me would be 6 hours.
That's
And
amazing. That's really good.
yeah, it was good. But it wasn't what I signed up for. It wasn't what
Okay.
I became an actor for.
All
And it
right.
wasn't fulfilling it wasn't fulfilling creatively.
So then is there a time when you tried to go back to more traditional acting?
Yes.
Okay.
So this happened when my son was about 16 years old. We had a standing movie date on Friday nights. And he came to me on Thursday and he's like, Mom, I don't want to hang out with you on Friday tomorrow. Not only do I not
Love
want to
you,
hang out with
Mom,
you tomorrow,
and see
but I
ya.
don't ever want to do this again on the
Right, exactly.
weekends.
Exactly.
Right.
You've done a good
And
job. I'm
yeah,
leaving.
exactly. And it was the first time, kind of back to what we started talking about, right? It was the first time in 16 years that I had really thought about, like, really, what do I want?
It's a
And I think my
crazy
husband
feeling.
was away on a golf trip or something. So I had the weekend to myself. And the answer was, well, I want to do an acting workshop. So I sat down, I Googled it, acting workshop Munich English, and one popped up. And there was one spot open starting the next day with a coach out of LA. And I went and I did it. And it was everything I had hoped it would be. Makes me almost a little bit emotional because there are some pretty crappy acting workshops as well. And it could have been something like that. And I think my life would have taken a completely different trajectory had that happened. But the course it was an amazing workshop and brought up all of the feelings and the connection and the reasons that I became an actor.
So I'm going to
And
click on that. Like I'm going to push on that just a teeny tiny bit because I
yeah,
think because it's past and for you, it's all the way in the past sense, but there's a lot of things that actually happened there. Like, so you had an opportunity to connect with yourself because everybody was gone. Your son was gone. Your husband was gone. And that gave you the space to sort of clear your head. And then you were able to connect with this feeling, but you made a choice to do the research, right? It's like the decision we make before the thing that gets the credit. It's like, oh, well, let me see what's out there. Is there a workshop? And then the next one, I mean, it's two separate things. Like, oh gosh, there's a restaurant down this street that serves a food I like. Going to the restaurant is a whole different sequence of action. It's a big step to actually sign up. And then a little bit of luck and kismet that you give credit to whatever that it turned out to be something that was killer that, you know, impacted the trajectory. But I just, as somebody listening to the story, it's like we always give the credit to the other thing. It was a good workshop, so that's what worked. Whereas sitting on your couch in your living room and being like, yeah, I'll do this, I think that's a choice that makes a difference.
totally. Taking that first step is
Yeah.
always the thing
Yeah.
that makes the difference
Yeah.
because, you never know where the second step leads to.
100%. We know
And
thousands, we all know hundreds of people who are like, I really want to do this. And then they never do. Right.
yeah,
They talk about it,
right.
they never do. And there's no judgment, right? Like I have a long list of things I've never done. But um, when you do make the decision, you're like, yeah, I'm going to jump out of the airplane.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I honestly believe that your passion, your curiosity, when you have a burning passion, a burning
Yeah.
curiosity, that is your key to your purpose.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, yeah. And I think that there's like all kinds of like, cliches that speak to that, but like hard work looks like opportunity looks like hard work,
Right.
like the person
Yeah.
that kind
Thomas
of thing.
Edison. Yeah.
It doesn't the decision to like look up a workshop may not have felt like a significant thing. It may have felt like what am I going to eat for dinner, or
It felt like a whim. I was
right,
like, oh, I think I'd like to
exactly.
do this.
And
And
right,
then it was there. I mean,
yeah,
you have to understand too, I'm in
like
Munich.
things like lined up.
Totally.
Which
Yeah.
we call it synchronicity or whatever. Like I
Yeah.
mean, it's great. It's such a fun feeling when that happens in big and small things. You look up that you want to go see a movie and you look up and it fits in your day. That's a great feeling. You
Yeah.
pull into the parking lot and it's like, there's a spot where I want to
Yeah.
be. But
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
hey, let me see if I take a workshop and it works. That's a really, really fun synchronicity. So, I love this part of the story because you and I might be in slightly similar age demographics. There is this whole sense of like reclamation for midlife situations, like
Hmm.
reclaiming the things. And
Yeah.
there are times where that doesn't vibe for me because we can't actually roll the clock back, right? Like I can't
Right.
actually go back and be 25. But 25 was great. It was a lot of fun, but I can't actually do it again. um, did you at this point, was there even a flash, even for a second, and there may not have been, of maybe I'll just do something else. I'll become a Pilates instructor instead of looking at the thing I used to do. I just made that thing up about Pilates. I don't have any, you know.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I, in the moment that I said I'm going to Google this, see if a workshop is available,
Right.
I hadn't yet made the decision to relaunch my acting career.
Oh,
I
okay.
just, I
I
just wanted
jumped
to
the
have
gun.
some fun. Yeah, I just wanted to have some fun.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was I left that workshop 3 days later, understanding that I had been trying to breathe underwater for 16 years.
Yeah.
Like, this is my element. This is what I am supposed to be doing. And I came home, I told my husband, I I don't know what this looks like. I'm 40. I was 47 at the time. Um, I'm still an American living in Germany, right? I have no idea what this looks like, but I need to give it another shot. And he was like, sure. He's very supportive, right? So I don't, but I also think he didn't get it.
Right. How would
Like
he
he
have known?
didn't,
How would he have known what
right.
it meant? Right. Yeah.
And so I had a couple of choices at that point. I had decided at this point, oh yeah, I need to relaunch my acting career. And my choice, I knew I was rusty.
Okay.
Acting is a skill, it's a craft, like a musician, like an athlete, like a dancer. So if you don't do it, and I even though I had been working acting adjacent, I hadn't been doing like there's a lot more that goes into it than people realize, I think. So I was feeling very rusty, and which was making me lack confidence in my skills.
Confidence comes from competence. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I knew I needed training. And so I had a choice. I could, fly to London, fly to New York, fly to LA and get the training I needed, but that would have been super expensive. It also would have been very time consuming. And I was still a mom, getting my kid up for
Right.
school and making dinner and my husband and, all of that. And so that really, it would have limited me to 1 or 2 times a year. And that would take a long time, right?
Yeah.
Or I could bring the experts to me. And that's
Oh,
what
I
I
want to hear
decided.
this. Okay. How did you do
Yes.
that?
Well, yeah, this is actually what has sparked this whole new phase of my coaching career as well.
Very
So,
good. Because it was good. That was, you see, you're going right along the same path because that was the next thing, like bring us to the present.
yeah,
Okay. Let's
yes,
hear
yes,
it. Here we
yes.
go. Here we go.
So that's what I did. My original intent was just to get the training that I could get in Munich for that price. So if I was
Right.
paying 500 euros a workshop in Munich, I didn't want to have to pay more than that by bringing the coaches in. So I knew that if I could find the coaches, good coaches, that I needed to find a handful of people to make this a viable thing for me. And that's what I did. And what very quickly became evident was I was getting free training, I was building a community, and I was making like you know, anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 per workshop, depending. And I was also building authority, which at the
Yeah.
time I thought was a negative because, and I'll tell you why, because it sounds weird, right? Because
It does.
yeah, I was not looking to have people look to me as a coach or
Right.
as a facility. I was there to learn just like they were. And when people feel like you're above them, then they are afraid to give you feedback.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
That's my experience, I should say. That's also my
Yeah.
experience.
And so I really kind of had to fight, like, no, guys, give me feedback. Tell me I suck. Tell me why I
Right.
suck, whatever it is, right? Because I want to get better. That's why I'm doing this. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and it had served its purpose. And then I relaunched my acting career. I was
All
very kind
right.
of methodical about it. And then I went and got an agent and I started getting on the casting director's radars and I started auditioning and doing all the things that I knew how to do, that all actors kind of know how to do when you get out of acting school, which are not enough.
Right. One of the things you mentioned in what you submitted is that during the pause, during the parent pause, that's what I call that for myself, the parent pause, where that
Yeah.
if you prioritize your kids, if you have that luxury to be able to do that, then it often impacts like a pause in other parts of your life. So, is that the industry changed?
Oh, total. I had changed.
You had changed and the industry had
I
changed.
left when I was 29,
Yeah.
28, and I was coming back as a middle-aged woman. I was 40s. Well, at this point, I'm almost 50. I'm
Yeah.
49 at this
You're
point.
supposed to be invisible then. Did you miss the
Exactly.
memo? You're supposed to be
Yeah, I guess I
retreating
missed
and
that one.
wearing
Yeah.
khaki pants and
Right. And
munching.
cut your hair short and
Yeah.
exactly. Wear big chunky jewelry. Um, yeah. So for me, like when you go to acting school, I mean, there's a whole lot we could unpack with that because there
Right.
there is, right, the whole middle-aged. I even hate that term, but what's wrong with it, really?
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
right?
right. It's like just, yeah, we could villainize it, we could embrace it, or we can just ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have to redefine it.
I think that, yeah. I mean, I think, and yeah, but I also am with you. I'm like, what does it even mean? Like, middle
What
of
is
what?
that? Yeah.
Middle of
And
what?
it
You
just,
know?
I mean, and how do you know?
Right,
Right?
exactly, exactly. I may have it, exactly. Yeah. So, but like you
I could
said,
live to
it's
be 200. Yeah.
there are all these like secret rules and traditions that come along with it and expectations and they don't seem to fit anymore. But
Yeah.
or maybe they don't seem to fit certain people. But all right, so we're coming all the way to present. You relaunch your
Well,
acting.
it's not, this is not the present. So this is about
Okay.
11 years ago. And within a couple of years, I had started to realize that what I had been relying on, which was luck when I was in my 20s, was not going to be so readily available to me in my 50s.
Okay.
And I also realized that while I felt very confident about my skill as an actor, I had no idea what it meant to be in the business of being an actor,
Oh,
because
yep.
that's what
Fair
you are.
enough.
You're a
Yeah.
solopreneur, right?
Yeah.
And that had never occurred to me. It's not what I signed up for, not what I wanted. I am an artist through and through. I'm like the creative, as they call it here in Germany, a creative
Okay.
chaot, which is like a creative chaos, basically,
Yeah.
right? Um, and in a way, that's like who I am. But I think I'm
Yeah.
sort of split because I also have a very entrepreneurial side about me as well. And that's when I realized, okay, well, if it's a business, then I better figure out what business people do,
Okay.
right? Yeah. So what am I selling? What's my brand? First of all, it started with my mindset, to be very
Yeah.
honest,
Well,
because I
that is
had,
if I am in business. What does that mean? That's mindset. Yeah.
well, and if I want to relaunch my career
Yeah.
as an almost 50-year-old woman, what does that mean with people looking at me like, really? Is that
What
what you want
does
to
it
do?
mean? Please clue us in.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, it means whatever you let it mean
Right,
is what it
right.
means, right? Whether you think you can or you can't, you're
That's right.
right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So, and people were looking at me kind of sideways, so, and I just had to kind of push it away and go, that's okay. I get it, but it's not going to stop me. And, but what I also realized was I did have some limiting beliefs around my age, around my lack of perfect German. And so these were two things I was not going to be changing at
It's hard
all.
to change your age.
As you said, right? We can't go back.
Sadly, we cannot. I mean, actually,
No.
not sadly. I like totally aggressively am choosing to love aging because
Yeah.
it's the only choice.
Yeah, it beats the alternative.
It does.
Right. And so I became a life and career coach first to just overcome my own limiting beliefs around
Right.
that. Like, and then I realized also, okay, I'm selling something, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm selling. Who am I now as an actor? I was still sort of stuck in who I was and, you know, coming to that. So I worked with some branding coaches, then that led to marketing, to all of these different things, right? And when I really started to buckle down and make a concentrated effort to understand what it was that makes me stand out, we're all special, but what is special? I don't know, right? Most
Right.
people just don't know the answer to that. And if you don't, I mean, there's good news and bad news. We all have a brand. That's the good news and the bad news, right? So whether you work on it or not, you have a brand. We all do. And especially when you are the product.
Right.
And if you are not having a hand in shaping that brand, then you are missing out on helping people to understand what you bring to the table.
Right. And it will be defined by how other people perceive you, which is you talked about it like you walked into the room and people were like casting you or shoeboxing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't
Typecasting.
participate,
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't
Yeah.
participate in it, that definitely is the thing. So we're supposed to talk for 30 minutes and we're already over, so I'm hitting the fast forward button to make sure
Okay.
make sure
Yeah.
we get through that. Does that bring us to the creation of Act Bold, which is
Yes.
okay.
So Act Bold came about because I had always organized these workshops. That was under the Actors Atelier. Then I had relaunched Act Bold, but kind of it was more just to do workshops whenever I needed money.
Right,
So,
okay.
like if I needed something to finance a short film, whatever it was, then I would throw on a workshop for that. So my objective had changed. It had been originally just to get the training, then it became to get money, extra money.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, most recently, the past 3, 4 years, it was to network on a whole different level with people that I want to work with. So inviting casting directors, other filmmakers to come and do a workshop, and then being able to have these conversations and everything around that. And also, when I started working on my branding, my opportunities to audition really like jumped way up. They got much better, and
Yeah.
the roles were much better, and the my bookings were better. Everything was better. And of course, then people were like, "Oh, how'd you get that?" And then that sort
Yeah.
of led to one-on-one, which very quickly led to my signature program for actors, which is called Get Better Roles. That's where I help trained actors who've been in the business for at least a couple of years to understand how to stand out, articulate what makes them special, and create more opportunities for themselves so they can get better roles, basically, is what it boils down to.
So I'm going to ask
And
you one quick question and then I'm going to because this what you did is really like a master class in like business building in a lot of ways. Did you have any expectation that when you leaned into the life and career coaching and were putting together workshops that it would have the magnification effect that it did on your casting opportunities? Like, did you see that
no,
coming? Yeah,
no.
that's the thing that because we think that very often in my own life I like and so that's the question I wanted to bring. It's like you have to like head down a road to know where it's going because so often we think that we're doing something for one reason and then something completely different happens.
Mm. Well, it's interesting you say a master class because this is where Passion Project to Pro was born from,
Right. And that
which
is yeah,
where I help people turn what they love into what they do without having to be an expert influencer or coach.
that's
So
beautiful.
it's exactly what I did to bridge that gap between my passion and making it my profession. Because I've coached with James Wedmore, Amy Porterfield, Sunny Leonard, like all of these really big names in the
Right.
coaching industry.
That is the you just listed like the hierarchy of the buzzwords in digital entrepreneurship. You know,
Totally.
yeah, boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom.
Yeah. 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 And in at least once a week, somebody will post in one of these communities, I'm really dealing with imposter syndrome. Anybody else? Or how do you guys deal with this? And like 97 people will respond, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
And the problem is we, many of us have been convinced, and I'm not saying that they do this because they do say to be an expert,
Right.
but there are also, the message is also there of just be 2 steps ahead. And I think when you're only two steps ahead of someone, you're always looking over your shoulder, like
Right.
waiting for people to catch up to you. And you are not feeling safe and secure in your place. So so the whole point of Passion Project to Pro is I take people from whatever their passion is, whether that's foraging for edible fauna, mushrooms, whatever, or
Caterpillar farming on
caterpillar farming,
a
raising
lavender on a
chickens.
lavender farm.
It honestly, as long as it doesn't require a higher degree and it's
Yeah.
something that you could learn from experts and coaches, there are a plenty of those.
Yeah.
And you are really becoming a curator of experts, and you are able to learn alongside them, alongside the participants. So it goes from ideation to the second to last time we meet is right before they launch their own workshop. But of course, I
Yeah.
take them through how to find the experts, how to find the other participants, how to price it, how to find the venues, how to know what kind of workshop you want to run, whether it's online, in person, retreat, whatever, right? There's 1,000 different possibilities. And then the very last time we get together is a debrief. How did your event go? What went well? What would you change? And when are you doing the next one? So that
Okay.
by the time they finish the 8 weeks that we spend together, they will have earned back their investment from the course. And I can give them like a 100% solid win.
Okay.
You know,
So I use the example of a caterpillar farmer, which I don't even know if that's a real thing. Probably it is, actually. Probably it is. True story. When early, like decades ago, when I was looking for inspiration and expanders for people who are creating businesses, one of my mentors was somebody who built a thriving business with sauerkraut, like teaching people how to ferment things like sauerkraut. And I remember listening to this interview, and she had a massive email list and a thriving business. And I would tell myself anytime I was about to chicken out, I was like, if she can do this, teaching people to ferment cabbage, like I cannot come up with any excuses. So tell people tell people your website address, and then I'm going to tell them about the offer that you've made for the audience.
amazing. Okay. So you can find me at act-bold.com. My name is Anne Alexander-Sieder, Sieder. I'm all over the place, very easy to find online. Or Act Bold Training without any dashes or anything.com as well.
And
Act
I
like
will put all
Linktree.
of that
Yeah.
in the show notes. And also, if you're on the Imperfect Adulting email list, it's a link that you can click on, which is absolutely the best way to get the information. You have been so generous to offer the audience the Passion Project to Pro workbook, which
Yes.
normally is $27, but the people who are in the audience can get it for free by clicking on a link. And this is a link that has like stuff in it. So you definitely want to go to the show notes or be on the email list to get that. That's super generous. I want to thank you for making that offer. We're going to
Yeah,
close this
absolutely.
up. Oh, you're welcome. So we're going to close this up with three ridiculous questions. Neither one of us have a talent for brevity. I got to say, it's not our strong suit. The challenge in this is keeping the answers short. The
Okay.
truth is that it's never the guest that messes it up. It's always me. So I am the problem, but let's do it anyway. We are recording this in December. I did not know you were in Germany when I wrote this question. We're going to see if it even makes any sense. My
Okay.
mind is on fall and winter holidays. If you have the choice between pumpkin spice or minty chocolate as a seasonal flavoring, which do you choose?
Minty chocolate.
Minty chocolate. Me too. Me too. Okay. Do you like to eat out in restaurants? This is an excellent question since you've lived all over the world. So, and if you like to eat in restaurants, can you think of the single worst meal you were ever served?
Oh man, I love to eat in restaurants. We eat really well, so I'm gonna say that. I can tell you the most overpriced meal we
Sure.
had. Yeah, it was like an 11 course meal, and like one of the courses was the bread basket, and it was just
Like a
ridiculous. It
Michelin.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
in Greece. That was yeah, a
The
big waste of
Michelin,
money.
my husband went through a thing where he wanted to really enjoy Michelin type things. And we went to several, and I finally had to like sit him down and be like, "You are a family style restaurant person. Stop making these reservations."
Right. We
'Cause they
went to
bring you,
one Michelin place.
they're like, here's a nugget and a leaf, and this is and this is
Totally. I was just going to say that. It was one of those, what do they call it? The molecular cooking,
I've never done that, but I've
right?
seen pictures. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so that one of the courses, I thought she was kidding. I literally laughed. She brought me like a dome and it
Yeah.
had smoke in it, and she lifted it up and waved it in front of my
And that was
nose.
it. And that was it.
We went to McDonald's after this meal.
That we ended up at a pizza place after like
Yeah.
one, it's $1,000 to pay for the meal, and then you go to get pizza afterwards. Exactly. It's like it's so funny.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Last one. What is the most recent or last book that you either read or listened to, or if that's not what you do, like a movie or a show that you streamed or watched that you enjoyed?
Oh, man. Baby reindeer.
Oh, that's so good.
It was so
That's
good.
so
Yeah.
good. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That was such
Yeah.
a good series. I'd forgotten about that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one. That is a good one. I love that. All right. Thank you very much, Alexander-Sieder. Thank you for being a wonderful guest on the Art of Imperfect Adulting.
Amy Stone, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.